You're listening to the Ordinary Joe's podcast with Joe D and Eric B. The Ordinary Joe's podcast.
All right, we are back with another podcast. I want to thank everybody who reached out on our Instagram page. I think Casey King's the only one that likes to respond. Casey, I'm throwing you a shout out earlier because you responded on the video games. And when we get to Casey, we'll talk about what his favorite video game section or segment that we're going to talk about today. Atari, we are going to break this down into two parts. Earlier, Atari, maybe like Super Nintendo, Joe got some stuff that he wants to talk about again. So bear with us today.
Yeah.
All right, I am Eric B.
And I'm Joe D, and we are
Ordinary Joes. Yeah, there you go. Sounds a lot better. Hey, it's Ordinary Joes. It's the thing, all right? It's the thing, all right? All right, man, go ahead and start this one off, man, because I know you got I got a lot of old video games I like to talk about, but you got some old video games that's just going to bring me back and bring back some memories for me.
Yeah. No, I'm taking it way back, but to before I even started playing video games, and only because like I said, I have older brothers and sisters, so they had, video games before me, and they had
my age too. They're my age.
Right. And I don't know, if you younger kids, maybe some video games have heard of it, but I'm going to start with ColecoVision, and that's a gaming system. Coleco, and I think I'm saying it right. I hope I'm saying it right.
I'm trying to go ahead, keep talking. I'm gonna do some research while you're talking.
Yeah. So that one I want to say, and Eric will look it up now. I think it came out in the 70s, and like I said, my older brothers and sisters had it, and I mean these are probably like the earliest memories like that I have, and it's of sitting there and watching them play on this screen, and I remember wanting to play. I had to have been like 3-4 years old. And I just see all these like figures and things moving on the screen, and
like, what?
Yelling at each other like, oh, and getting all excited. So I remember at one point them giving me the control, and now I think about it, probably just wasn't plugged in, and they let me play for like 5 minutes. And
wait a minute, is that something you do now for these kids that wants to play with you? Is that what you do?
I used to do that with my little cousins when they wanted to play. Like, yeah, here you go.
You're this guy right here, okay? You're the one killing everybody.
Hey, it's a great trick. They think they're involved, and they're not, messing up your game. But yeah, that was the first, first introduction to video games. But like I said, that was like before my time. But I did find out something interesting when I was kind of doing a little research on it. I didn't know that Nintendo wasn't the only one that had Donkey Kong and Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
It was actually on ColecoVision as well, and a bunch of other systems that were out back in those days that just, I guess towards the end of the 70s, that craze kind of died out before it was revived again in the 80s. So,
wow.
That was crazy to me.
It's funny because, you bringing up ColecoVision and me growing up in that era, my parents were pretty frugal when it came to video games, and me, it's like, we're not going to buy you that, and it's like, I'm going to go back older than the ColecoVision, released in 1972, the year I was born, but we probably got it like in the late 70s or maybe even the early
TVs
80s.
Back then?
Yeah, they did. It was kind of crazy, right? In black and white. But it was a gaming system called Pong, made by Atari. And it was this little box, and it only had two knobs, right? Okay. And I don't know if you remember how you used to have to plug in the video games back in the days to your TV. It was like this weird UHF kind of thing. And it's not the way it is right now. Yeah, the two little hooks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's how we had to do it. And it was just this gaming system, and the game was just Pong. That's all it was. You had two sticks on one end. And then you had a ball. It's like tennis. It's like table tennis.
Yeah. So that was a whole system.
That wasn't just. Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was a game for Atari.
And the funny thing was, it was made by Atari, but before Atari came out with their systems in the 80s, they had the Pong system. And the weird part about it is now these kids are spoiled HDMI, surround sound. The little box that it came with had a speaker right on top. So all you would hear is like, dunk, dunk, dunk. And it's like, we got our kicks off that machine. It's like, it's like, if anyone has a Pong system out there, if you guys remember the Pong system, come on, man. You guys know what I'm talking about.
Seriously, you could sell it on eBay if you still have it. Cause that
And the sad part was, it was, if I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, guys. If I remember, you had to have 2 players to play.
Oh, okay.
So
there was no AI.
There's no AI. Yeah, no AI back then. So you're sitting here trying to, do this with 2 knobs, trying to hit one and trying to. Oh my God, it was. Thank God Atari came out. That's all I gotta say.
Is that the lonely kid with no friends that he had to do?
Lonely kid. It's like, okay, so I'm reading it right now, and it does says home Pong console released in 1975, and it was released by Sears. And this is exactly what I'm looking at right now. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Again, it was black and white. Didn't matter if you had a color TV back then, because the system was just black and white, and you got your kicks off of it. So it's
yeah, you know what it was though? It was back then. It was all about the gameplay. It wasn't, being actually able to play a game on TV was the novelty of it. That was like the kick. Like, oh, this is so cool. It didn't really matter that it was just 2 sticks going up and down.
That's all it was. And I was like, and I enjoyed playing. I'm like, wow, and again, these kids nowadays, they're spoiled with the systems that they have.
Oh my God. So did you have a Pong or did you have to
I did. I had a Pong.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where it was like sitting in the corner for the longest time and I didn't know what it was. Dad always told me not to touch it. And then I guess when Atari came out, he was like, you have an Atari right here. And it did say Atari on it. It did say Atari on it. But it was Pong, I was like, this is Atari? Yeah, exactly.
Dad was a few steps ahead of you.
This is an Atari system. I don't know where he got it from. I don't even know, where it was just sitting there for the longest time. And then when Atari came out in the 80s, here's your Atari,
Yeah. That's freaking hilarious.
All right, Dad. Thanks for the Atari system.
Yeah. Atari, I don't know, when that came out, like I said, I was lucky because I had older brothers and sisters, so they kind of they softened up my parents before I had to, so they were already kind of used to video games by the time it came around to stuff I was begging for.
You're like, so looking at this thing, it looks like ColecoVision came out in 1978, so came out right before the Atari system came out. And it's funny because I do remember, and you still have people nowadays, it's like, what'd you like better, ColecoVision or Atari? Right? And I never
were they similar at all? Or
looking at this console, ColecoVision, it looks like a cell phone from looking at it. I never got to touch a ColecoVision, so I don't know what it was like. And you guys remember the Atari was just like a little joystick with just one button. ColecoVision looks like it looks more modern from I remember the Atari systems back in the days.
Now, what was, since we're on Atari, so we're starting, what would you say was your favorite Atari game? Or did you have one? Because there was a lot. There were a lot to choose from.
There was a lot. And I made a list like I said I'm going to start doing from now on. Looking at my list right now, there was the games that, I hate games where you have to try to solve something. So games like, moving forward a little bit like Zelda and all that stuff. I hated those games because you had to try to, what are they called? Like RPG, like role-playing games?
Yeah.
I hated those games. I'm more let's kill whatever, shoot things. So, I think...
So you like the fast action, handling business right away.
Yes.
No thinking.
And remember, like when Atari first came out, we didn't have a lot of options. Like I think when you bought the Atari system, the first game that came with it was Combat. I don't know if you remember Combat.
No.
So it's kind of like the graphics are so, cheap. Of course, it's like 1970. What am I looking at? 1976 was the graphics, right? 76. Right. So it's just these square little tanks. And
was that like 16-bit maybe? Right?
Maybe even less. I want to say 8 bits, But
wow.
Yeah. And it was like these little tanks, and you had tanks on each side. And you would shoot each other, right? You would try to shoot each other. But the good thing about that game was there was an AI finally. So if you wanted to play by yourself, you could. But, us as kids, we always wanted to feel, we want to be like, hey, we're the best. So we're going to play 2 players and just try to sneak. I mean, that game was crazy. Now that I think about it.
Isn't that funny though? I mean, you're talking about what year did you say? 70, 76, 78?
Yeah, I wrote it down at 76, but I didn't probably start playing until the 80s.
So that's, I mean, one of the first times you're seeing AI, and then you jump forward to now, which really isn't that long of a time. And you look at the computer brains now and like the AI now, it's like, it's scary. I mean, it's literally talking to you like, hey, you suck.
I mean, just again, from, I'm one of those guys where I grew up in that early stages of, like video games kind of thing. So I want to say I saw the evolution from what it was to what it is, right?
Right.
And I can't even play the video games now because like when games started becoming first-person shooter games, what's the first thing it says on the box, right? It says these games can cause seizures, nausea, and all that stuff. And I'm one of those fucking guys that if I play a first-person game, I got to pause like the first 10 minutes because I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, this game's giving me a headache,
Yeah, no, I got you. And like the amount of graphics now that flash across the screen and the hand-eye coordination that you need to play some of these games now is insane. I mean, we're jumping ahead, but yeah. I just wanted that comparison of going from like one joystick and a button
and again,
10 buttons.
Like when we became those kids that went from Atari to arcades, and you saw those guys who's like slapping the arcade buttons hella fast. We got that because we were practicing with Atari, right? You had to learn how to be fast on the trigger when it came to the Atari games, and and I was one of those kids that got the Atari late. So by the time Atari was already like, I don't want to say at the down end, but other systems started coming out. That was a little bit. This was the Atari 2600, right? That first came out, right? Because there was another Atari. I forget the name, the 8200 or something like that. 32.
Yeah. So I always knew, at least I thought I knew, there was the Atari 1600 and then the Atari 2600. But apparently there is no such thing as Atari 1600. Excuse me.
I was gonna say 1600.
It's the Atari VRS or VCS or something like that. But they did come out with a later version of Atari after the 1600 that we probably had. But yeah, you can check that because I'm not sure. But like my Atari memory is kind of limited because I was such a little kid. But there are a few that like, are classics in my mind that my brothers had, and one of them was Missile Command.
Okay.
And that's for those of you who don't know, it's basically like these missiles they don't look like missiles. It's basically these lines that are coming down on the screen. Right? I can't really do it with my hands, but these lines that come down, cascading down across your screen, and then you have to kind of shoot them and intercept these missiles before they land and blow up your base or whatever it is. That one I was addicted to as a kid. That was probably one of the first video games that I was just like addicted to, just sitting there like, zoning out like a zombie, mouth open, but sitting way too close to the television, probably why I'm like blind now. That one for me was like probably my favorite Atari game, I think.
I mean, it's funny because you're going to bring up all these games. It's just going to bring back memories. That's one of the games you talked about, eye-hand coordination. You had to have a good eye-hand coordination because, Joe described it perfectly. You have all these missiles coming from the sky. You have 3 pods, I think, of like bases. Oh. There's like a left, a middle, and a right. Now these missiles are coming down like this, and you have to try to get these missiles before it hits your little base. And if that middle base is done, you have these 2 right here. I mean, again, eye and finger coordination pretty much is what you had to do. And
sure.
That video game, it's one of those games where what I hated about Missile Command is I would get so good. I'm like, yes, like you the whole part of Atari was just getting to the next level, right? I would get to the next level and then like, level 12, and all of a sudden the fucking missiles are like, whoosh, coming down like this, and you're like, wait.
So it's like impossible.
You already knew once you pass level 11 and you're going to level 12 that you're, no, even if you had all 3 bases, you're done.
Yeah, and you're already like you're psyching yourself out because you know it's gonna be super fast and your heart's already racing. Like, all right, I got this this time.
Exactly.
And this is like, damn it. I read something that I guess I think that was what do you call it? Oh no, I'm sorry, that's the wrong game. There's another arcade game, Space Invaders, that's similar to this one that was like one of Japan's first arcade games, and it was like such a hit that like they ran out of coins.
Wow.
Like the 100 yen coin or something like that. Like that's how much kids were like playing it out there.
Well,
which is like
Missile
nuts.
Command came out in 81 for Atari, then Space Invaders came out in 80. And Space Invaders was, again, one of my favorite games. If you ever played it, you know, they had the arcade version and then you had the Atari version. And almost similar. The only difference is, you know, again, we're talking about 8 to 16-bit consoles where everything was square. And it was one of those, God, man, Space Invaders. I want to buy an Atari system just to plug it in. I do.
They have, I want to say they came out with a new one because like all the classic systems, they came out like with rebooted, you know, smaller, easier ones to play with now. Because in fact, I was playing Pac-Man with my wife earlier on the Nintendo Mini.
I think the Atari one, if I'm not wrong, they released it with just a joystick, and all the games are in that joystick.
Oh yeah, you know what? You might be right.
And you just plug that into your TV, and that's how you play the old games. I think. I mean, you know, I thought I saw that maybe years ago, and I could be wrong, but
that's weird.
Nostalgia, man, nostalgia. And again, like thinking about like all the old games that we used to have. One of my favorite games came out a year later from Missile Command, and it was a game called Yar's Revenge from Atari.
Yar's?
Yar's. Yeah, YARS apostrophe Revenge. And it's, again, one of those games, you're this little, I don't even know how to describe it. I want to say you're a little spaceship, and then there's this thing that you have to try to chip away from, and you're chipping away, and then when you finally can break into a little hole, there's this thing in the middle that surrounded that I want to say it's a base. And then when you chip enough or chip away enough, you can fire a missile and try to, you know, destroy that, whatever that thing is. And again, it's one of those games where you're good till you get to like a level where you're like, dude, you know for sure you're not going to pass this level.
Yeah, that was definitely I think like the problem with, if there was a problem with the older games, with that it's like you're just cruising along and then you just get to this one level that's just like, all right, don't even bother, just shut it off.
I'm done.
I think that maybe that was just put in there just so kids would just put it down and go to sleep and get some rest, go read a book.
You had the creators like, we didn't think they'd get this far.
Yeah.
We thought they'd be done by the first level.
There's one game that and again, you might remember better than me, but it's kind of like widely renowned as like one of the worst games ever made, and it was E.T.
Oh my God,
the extraterrestrial. Like, I mean, that it was on the news that like stores were like returning their freaking stocks of it back right before Christmas.
Oh my God. Oh God. Talk about bad memories. E.T. was one of those games, you know, Steven Spielberg decided, hey, the movie did really great. Let's make a video game. And who do they reach out to? They reach out to Atari, right? Game was terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, just talk about a game where you're just wandering around and you know, you're E.T., your character is E.T., you're wandering around, and the best part of the game was when you press the button, E.T.'s neck goes up. So his head gets a little longer. And there's certain things you can do use that for, like, I think it was like to make the flower come back alive. If you guys never watched the movie E.T., they did a lot of things from the movie, but there was no ending to that stupid game.
Yeah, and there was like a lot of like these just pitfalls where you're just like walking and then you fall for like no reason. So there's this documentary on Netflix. It's called High Score. It's a docuseries. So there's a couple episodes. I would check it out, especially if you played video games in this era that we're talking about now, because it'll bring you back a lot of memories. and they interview the guy that made the game, and when he explains what happened, like it makes all the sense in the world. They, like you said, they decided they wanted, Spielberg decided he wanted to do this game, but kind of last minute decides he wants to do it, and they wanted to do it before Christmas. So I think it was insane. It was something like 5 weeks amount of time that he had to make, and mostly everyone was like, no, there's no way I'm not doing that. And this one guy who was young and was just like, had all the confidence in the world, was like, yeah, I could do it, and they're like, all right, great. You got 2 days. We're going to pick you up and fly you out to go see Spielberg so you can pitch him the game. He's like, what? Like literally like 36 hours. He had time to just kind of come up with a concept. So he said 5 weeks he was up day and night doing this, like moved the big ass equipment. We're talking about, the 70s where it wasn't a laptop. It was like, equipment that took up half a room. And he banged it out, and he was like, it wasn't his intent to make the worst game ever. It's just that was what he had in 5 weeks. So I mean, I guess considering the amount of time he had, it's a great feat, but it was still a crappy game.
I mean, you gotta think about us kids. We're kids. We want to play a game where we can shoot and kill, or play a sports game where we could win and the game's over. You gave it your best. But this game, you're just wandering around. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, I saved E.T.'s life maybe twice, but the spaceship came, picked him up. You would think the game's over, but then he came back, and then now you're doing the same exact thing all over again. And I'm like, what else can I do? I already saved the flower, if they came back with an ET game now with the graphics and the way it is, I bet you now people like me would say, hey, I want to try this and I want to play it. Because, that's the era I grew up in. But, I mean, I feel bad for the guy who made it, but.
I mean, give it time. It's just a matter of time before they do an ET remake. They remade everything else, and everything that we tend to speak about on the podcast seems to come to fruition. So I'm putting it out in the ether. ET movie, ET video game to follow.
I text Joe.
See what happens.
I text Joe before the show, and if you guys heard our stuff last week, everything we talked about was going to be on TV. And right before we got on, they're showing all the Rockies. And we talked about Rocky 4 last week, showing Mad Max 1, 2 through the 3, and they were showing Doom right before we got on the show. Those are movies that we talked about, and I'm like, all right,
I saw a few too. I think Dumb and Dumber and Godfather 2 were another one that I saw. That I'm like, this is crazy. You're
just like, wow. But anyways, yes. Video games. The video game guy who made E.T. decides to do it again, give him, if he was like, dude, I need redemption, let's do this. Please do it.
They should let him redeem himself. Yeah. Let him do something cool. Because I think both with graphics these days, I think a movie and a new video game would probably be pretty cool.
But then, this is something I wanted to talk to you about in a different podcast. And, we could touch on this in a different podcast, but just touching this, letting you know now, is E.T. a movie that you should do a reboot or a remake of?
I don't think so. But I mean, if we're, you can't beat them, join them sort of attitude. Like I'm, and again, we'll talk about this. And I'm generally not a fan of remakes, especially not of classic movies.
Yeah, you brought that up.
When they're done well, it's great. Yeah. But how often does that happen? But let's just say, for argument's sake, if I had to choose a classic movie that hasn't been remade yet, I think I would like to see E.T. just because it's it's sci-fi, it's feel good family movie. It's a fun movie. It's sad too, but
I'll tell you a story. For Halloween last week or a couple weeks ago, I dressed up as Elliot. I had the E.T. in my basket, and the people who watched the movie knew exactly who I was. The younger generation, the millennials, all those people, they were like, I thought Yoda was green. I'm like, this isn't Yoda. They're like, oh, who is it? And it's like, you have to explain to them who. They're like, oh, yeah, I know who E.T. is. I just never watched the movie. So it's like, maybe.
Why is Yoda wearing a hoodie?
Maybe it is time to do a remake for the younger generations.
Yeah. Introduce them to it. Come on. They've done everything else. Why not?
Yes.
At this point.
Do it. Do it. But yeah, terrible arcade game. God. Did you
Yeah. Good.
go ahead?
Good.
There was just this one story you talking about that is somebody found a bunch of cartridges in their backyard because they moved into a house. And when they opened up the box and found those little Atari cartridges, it was all ET. And some of them were like brand new, still in the box.
Yeah.
And from the thought of it, it sounds like someone just bought it, didn't like the game, and just buried it and hoped nobody would find it.
Yeah, or it could have maybe someone that owned the store, because like I saw some footage of like just like store owners like, yeah, I'm just trying to get rid of it before the holidays. Like, there's nothing I can do with it. People were returning them. Like, oh my god,
Buy one, get 5 free.
Oh man, another classic Atari game that was big in the arcade and big for the home console too. And I think everybody, it's hard to find someone who really doesn't like this game, but it's Pac-Man.
Oh my god, yes.
The little yellow guy. It's funny, the concept not the concept, but the way the idea of Pac-Man came up was when all the video game designers and creators were sitting around coming up with ideas for games. The creator, I forget his name, it's like Toru something. I don't want to jack his name up, so we'll just go with his first name. He said they were eating pizza, and he grabbed a slice of pizza, and he looked at the shape that was left, and he just right away said it looked like a face to him, a mouth, and then it just went from there. I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. Pizza and Pac-Man, my two favorites.
And it's one of those games where before it finally hit our consoles, before it hit Atari, it was big, like you said, in the arcade game, right? They even made a video or song. It was called Pac-Man Fever in the 80s.
Was it a rap song?
No, I want to say it was like
surprised.
If they came out with a remake now, it'd probably be Drake, doing the whole Pac-Man song. But no,
or
just
Travis Scott.
Yeah. No, it was just a regular song, and he was just like, and it's funny because the song was called Pac-Man Fever, and he was like, I got Pac-Man Fever. Pac-Man Fever is driving me crazy. Those are the only lines that I remember. And then they actually added sounds from Pac-Man. It's like, when he's eating the little dots, and then all of a sudden, like he eats the ghost. And, growing up in the 80s, you're like, hey, this is a cool song, right? And now that I look at it, I'm like, oh, my God. The hell am I talking about? That was not a good song.
That was like when the Bears made their Super Bowl song.
Oh, my God. Every team made a Super Bowl song. But, how do you feel about Pac-Man was already big, right? Everybody loved Pac-Man. And then, they came out with, I want to say, a part 2 or even a second one. They came out with Miss Pac-Man. How did you like, did you like Miss Pac-Man?
So I did like Miss Pac-Man only because, again, like, Pac-Man had been out for a while before I was even, born, I believe, because I think it came out in the 70s. So when I was kind of old enough to play Miss Pac-Man, was the new game. So I actually started with Miss Pac-Man, but I found out this interesting story about it. So originally, actually, Pac-Man was a game that the designers wanted to make a game that girls would like. Yes. Because they said at that time, the video game culture, like the few kind of places you could go to play video games, these like halls of things, it was just a bunch of guys and, real sweaty and gross. And they're like, no girl would want to go and play there. So they wanted to do something that would appeal to them. And it did. Yeah. Like, especially for girls in the States, they seemed to love the game and it was a smash. Yeah. But anyway, there was these guys in MIT who, when we were talking about Space Invaders, the problem with Space Invaders early on was that when it was easy to beat, and then once you beat it, that was it. So they made these like enhancement mods where they can put it on the game and make it better and make it harder. So long story short, they get sued by Atari. But Atari ends up actually settling out because people love the mod so much.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, so they settled out, but they said the only catch was you guys have to come work for us and you have to design games for us. Man. And any more enhancements or mods you do has to go through us.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, they had already done a Pac-Man one. So they're like, shit, what are we going to do? So at that time, Atari wasn't the one that was the maker of Pac-Man, I believe. But they were like,
I think it was Midway. It was Midway that came out with
Midway,
Pac-Man.
Right. they went to Midway with this idea for a new character, but the way around it so that they wouldn't get sued was it created a new character, Miss Pac-Man.
Miss Pac-Man. Oh, nice.
And that's how they were able to get away with not getting sued.
Yeah,
Because at that time, no one knew about the deal that they had yet with Atari.
Okay.
That was kind of on the low. So,
Good.
so that, that kind of makes sense why they did it.
That is good Pac-Man knowledge there, my friend. That is good Pac-Man knowledge.
Learn stuff here on the Ordinary Shows.
I learned something there. I never knew that. But you got to also remember when we're playing the game on the life-size arcade, you're spending your quarter to play the game. Now it's released on Atari, and it comes out. We want to play it. Came out in 1982 in the Atari system. Now you got to remember, you're going from, I want to say 48-bit graphics to downsize to like 16 8 gig bits. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, the fun factor was there. You're doing the same thing, you're playing the game, but the way it looks and the way the gameplay was nothing like the arcade games. And it was something I would think it was more for like back then for me, because I was a younger kid when it first came out. Where you had your teens and your adults who would rather play the arcade game. And it's like, they called, and it's funny because I still remember this. They had a Pac-Man contest here one time in Pier 39. They used to have this area called Midway, and it was all Pac-Mans from Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Junior, all those Pac-Man games that came out. They had a Pac-Man contest out there. And then when someone said, you need to go home and practice on your Atari, I remember this one guy said, that's garbage, because you want to practice, you better come here, spend your money and practice here, because you're not going to get the same effect as you do when you get home. And it's funny because that's stuck in my head, and I'm sitting here at home and I'm got that little joystick, and I'm like, I am, it's like, you're right, dude. I'm not getting that same effect, so it's like, it's totally, it was good to have when you were home. It was good to have. It was a fun game to play, but it wasn't the arcade. So that was the downfall that Atari had. Right. It's like you couldn't really, No,
I definitely, you couldn't, it's hard. So much of why we like video games is for the experience. And back then, the experience was going to the arcade, hanging out with your friends, and, hanging out, meeting some girls there, eating some pizza, burgers, or whatever the hell, that was part of it was like going out to bowling or whatever. It was part of the experience. It wasn't solely about the game, because now you got it at home. You just took all that out and it's just the game. But that might be what kind of exposed a lot of games for maybe not being as good as people thought they were. Yeah. And pushing, the video game companies to like, all right, we got to make these a little more engaging,
This is my go ahead, keep going. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, just the whole, like, that's the whole high score thing in games, that they put that in for what do they call that? There's a term for replay value. Wow. So it's like when you play, all right, I got my score. Now I want to beat that score. Yeah. So you keep playing, keep putting those quarters in, because otherwise you beat it. All right, I'm done. And it's just, there's like some kind of like psychologist or somebody who kind of studies the brain and figured this stuff out.
It can't just be fun. It got to be scientific at the same time, right? You got to be but I was going to tell you, this playing the game, this is my favorite sound. I got a little soundboard. Right when you died, that's what you heard. And then you had the little, the start.
That was my favorite. That's when the anxiety kicked in.
You know what's funny? I was the worst Pac-Man player ever, right? The worst in Atari, even in the arcade game, right? So the very first time I heard this, I don't know if you ever heard this. So when you pass, was it the first 2 or 3 stages?
That's the second one. I only know that because I literally played it earlier today.
So when you pass the second stage, you get to go, and they play this little intermission, right? Then you're like, I only got to watch other people do that. Always, because
damn, you were that bad.
I was terrible. I was one of those guys who would camp out at one of the power balls, right? And as soon as enough ghost gets to me, I would chomp it. And by the time I get the last ghost up, they're already like, rejuvenated or whatever you call them, right? So
Yeah, I was a guy that would
terrible.
just get those pellets and not even chase them, just so I can clear
Clear
out the
the
board
board.
because I'm like otherwise I couldn't do it.
And like nowadays, there's this place in Alameda. For you guys who live in the Bay Area, there's this place in Alameda called High Scores, where they have vintage video games. And
Oh, cool.
the cool thing about it is they don't take quarters like they used to. You go in there, you pay like $10 a person, and you get to play whatever video games is open. All you got to do is press one. And the one time that I went there was maybe like 3 or 4 rows of Pac-Man, right? I got the worst feeling ever, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not touching this game. And they were like, this is like the game you grew up with. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to touch this game. I know me. After the first level, all you'll hear is, that's all you'll hear. It's like, I can't play this game.
I don't want to do it.
I'm done. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, it was a fun game. And you want to talk about eye-hand coordination. Man, I've seen people, like you said, bowling alleys, arcade places. You can't even talk to them because they're so concentrated on this, level of this Pac-Man thing. You remember the guy who beat Pac-Man? It's like this long-haired.
No. I've heard the story, but I don't know what he looks like there.
And he beat Pac-Man so bad that when the game was done, I'm looking him up. His name is Billy Michael. 1999. Is that what he did? Yeah, he beat Pac-Man in 1999. And you know what? I want to say this was 1989. 1999 seems a little too late. So it could have been a misprint. So he beat Pac-Man so bad that the arcade game just didn't do anything else after that. Like after he got to the last level, no one thought he would get to that last level. And after he got to that last level, it was like, that was it. There was nothing else to do.
It just froze.
Billy Mitchell. I'm sorry, not Michael. Billy Mitchell is the guy who beat Pac-Man. Yeah.
There was another guy. His name I forget. I don't know what year. It might have been like 78. I think it was. His name was Rick Davies, who played Space Invader for 31 hours on 1 quarter.
Jesus Christ.
I don't know if that's a Guinness Book record, but I would assume so. But you never know because I'm sure since then people tried to beat that. But
yeah.
That's insane to me.
That is
31 hours. I can't do anything there for 31 hours straight.
Yet alone with 1 quarter.
Yeah,
wow.
Seriously. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Rick Davies.
I'm trying to think. I don't remember if Space Invaders was one of those video games, the arcade video games where, you know how you have video games, once you die, you could respawn by putting another quarter in. I don't remember if Space Invaders was one of those games.
Yeah. I'm not sure how it was done. If you look it up, they have, like the interview with him and stuff like that. So I don't know if he was allowed to take a break or what it was, because they were saying how you had kind of 3 levels with Space Invader, three levels of players. Like if you had a good player he would play by like 10 minutes, an exceptional player would be like 30 minutes, but like the really, really good players, they can just keep playing. They won't die.
Jeez.
They had this one tournament. I'm not sure where it was, but they had it was 5 people playing, and they were from all the big cities. It was New York, San Francisco, LA, Texas, and there was another one, and they were playing, and the first kid gets knocked out after like a half hour, and they get down to the last three, and they just kept going, so that they had to just stop the tournament after like an hour and a half, and whoever had the highest score was the winner.
That was the winner,
and that was how they judged it. So which is why those MIT guys decided to make those enhancements, because they're like, well, that's boring. It has to be more challenging.
Do you remember those enhancements when you were growing up? There was something called a Game Genie, and the Game Genie I don't know if it came out with Atari, but I do know for sure it came out with like the Nintendo systems, where it was, you have the cartridge and then you have the Genie, then you put that cartridge in the Genie and then take that Genie with the cartridge in your console, and again you would have 99,000 lives, and and it was one of those cool things to get. But then you had people who were like, no, this might mess up my system. I don't want I spent like hundreds of bucks on this system, and I don't want this to mess up. And there was a warning label on there that can cause damage to your system. So
Oh, that's crazy. No, I didn't even know. And it's what's nuts is that they're still doing that now on games. Like there's times I've played online where, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but there was times I've played like Halo or
Yeah.
Halo 2 for Xbox, and the first time I ever found out about mods where we were playing online, and you just see guys like just flying up to parts of the
Yeah.
the level that I'm like, how the hell do you
How'd
get
you
up
get
there? And I'm sitting here like an idiot trying to figure out how to get up there.
Yeah.
And then I come to find out that they just did these mods to their game, and then that's how they're able to do it. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. I mean, it's cool if we were all equal.
Yeah.
We were all doing it,
No, but It's funny. Speaking of Halo, I want to throw a quick shout out to Casey King, who again throws us. I put out the questions on our Instagram page, and Casey's the one that likes to answer our questions. He's a little younger than we are, so his games were he played a game called Star Wars Rogue Squadron on the PC. Never heard of it. Wasn't really a big PC player, but he also does mention when the first Xbox came out and Halo came out, he played both Halo games, and that's something we can talk about. Casey will talk about probably next week when we touch on more of the I wouldn't call it the CD games. That's because now we're talking about the cartridge games, right? Where if it didn't work, you're like you're blowing into the cartridge and but
putting two games in and holding one in there, so
sure
it's
it doesn't, man. But Atari was notorious for like coming out with games and not putting a lot of effort into the games. Like when I say graphic wise, maybe it was because the way it was back then. Like when you play a game like basketball, the game was called Basketball, released in 1978. Again, later years, but it technically was just two guys who had two baskets on each end. And it looks like you were dribbling a box because they couldn't get the full round shape of a ball.
Right.
And all you're doing is you're going back and forth, and whoever can make the most baskets wins, right? And it was funny because like that game,
shoot box.
You found out at the end later on when I was, again, I played this game in the 80s, that if I stood underneath the opponent's basket while he shot the ball and I blocked it, they didn't call goaltending. So
you could just blatantly just
that's all
knock it out.
We were doing. I mean, the score was probably like 1-1 throughout the whole game because we were just sitting there goaltending. And video games now are perfect because everything is by the book. The rules are there. But back then, man, if you found that little, way to screw things up, you pretty much won the game.
Yeah, we used to call it a cheese. If you found that just one little glitch that would always work, but like, come on, so why are you cheesing? Why are you cheesing? I don't know where it came from, but that's what we used to call it. Because every game you play it long enough, you find that little thing that'll give you the edge that the designers weren't expecting to happen, and but it works every time. There was this football game called Game Breaker. It was college football, for PlayStation, and there was a glitch similar to that, and we'll talk about it later, but where when you throw a pass, if you're playing defense, if you can completely like pass interference, you can tackle the wide receiver, knock him out of the play as long as your safety intercepts it. If it's an interception, it's completely allowed. If they don't catch it, then it's a foul. Like but they weren't as detailed as some of the games now, where they literally call offsides and all the little kind of things like that. But that was definitely a cheese that we used to use.
I mean, it was one of those. So when Atari first came out, they had two controllers. I don't know if you remember. They had the joystick controller. Then they had the little one where it had a little circle.
The knob.
There was a game in 1981 that from this day on is one of those games where I wasn't good at all the other games, like I said, but for some reason, this game called Kaboom, where it was a robber that was standing on top of a building. You had these 3 barrels of water, right? He's throwing down bombs, and you have to try to catch it or defuse it with these barrels of water. And of course, as the stages go on, as it gets harder, he's throwing more out. It's getting a lot faster, and you're like going like this back and forth. It was the only one freaking game that I was actually good at. To where hot eye-hand coordination. You didn't have to press a button. You're just turning the knob, like this. It was to a point where it's like, once I got so high in the level that the next day when I tried to play that game again, I was like, I don't want to play this no more because it was boring now. Yeah, it was boring because now you're like, I already got to stage, I don't know, stage 20 or whatever the stage was, but it was a fun game because it was one of those games where if I see it now, I want to play it just because it brings back that nostalgia factor.
Yeah. Yep.
But it was one of those games where it's like, geez.
No, I know what you mean. I mean, I've always loved video games since a kid, but I was never one of those kids who would obsess over it or like I get bored. I can play a game hardcore for a month and then I'll put it down and I won't look at it for a while, or I just kind of get into other stuff. But I feel like everybody has just that one game for whatever reason they're just good at. When I was little, because like I said, I love games, but I always sucked at them.
Yeah,
I was never good.
Yeah.
Everybody would be like the fighting games. I was just no competition at all. But when it came to racing games, for some reason, that was my fun. And even back with Nintendo, there's this game RC Pro Am.
Yeah,
and it was a racing game with remote control cars.
Yes.
And it's, it had like winding roads and oil slicks and boosts and all that. For whatever reason, I was like the Bobby Fischer of RC Pro Am. Like we had this like kind of summer at home camp that my mom used to send us to. All it was a community center that you go to every day in the summer. And, they take you on trips and you do all this stuff. And they had a Nintendo. So you were allowed to bring, if you were daring enough, you were allowed to bring one of your own games from home, if you think you can make it back without somebody taking it from you. So I brought my RC Pro Am. And man, when I tell you I cleaned house,
of course,
that was like my proudest moment in my video game life was when I brought RC Pro Am to the center and kicked everybody's ass. It's like, but then I had to run back home because like this older kid wanted to take it from me.
Take it out from you. I never played this game before.
Like, all right, I gotta go. My mom's calling me. Like,
I'm trying to find the soundboard for the intro, man, but I can't find it. But the intro to that game, just right when you plug it in or put the cartridge in and you hit, before you even hit start, it's just that the sound of that game. It's like, it brings back memories. It's one of those games where it's like, I can sit here for days and play RC Pro Am.
Yeah.
But it's, it's one, again, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but it's one of those games where you have to try to you have to keep getting good and try to get the better cars. It's like, you can't go to level 5 with the first level car because it's just not going to work.
Yep. You have to upgrade. See, and again, back to what I was saying, it was the gameplay. It wasn't necessarily about graphics back then. It was just, they had a knack for making you just want to do better every time, or just make it to that next level, or they screw with your mind in a way that it's great though. It's engaging. You get lost in it, and before hours have passed.
You do. Like fighting games. You talk about fighting games. You like certain fighting games. I lost my thought. 1984, the arcade came out. I want to say 1983. And it was a game called Kung Fu Master. I don't know if you remember that game.
God, yes, I do.
Where you have to go through levels.
Yeah. Did they eventually come out with that on Nintendo?
They did with Nintendo, and then they came out with it before Nintendo came out. Nintendo's name was, I think it was just called Kung Fu.
Just Kung Fu, right.
And Atari came out was Kung Fu Master, right?
Right, which was the better one.
The better of the two.
Because it was the arcade version.
Yes. And when
in my opinion, anyway.
When that came out for Atari, I honestly don't think I played anything else other than that, just because it was one of those games where you didn't need to try to, get you had to get better each stage that you went through. For you guys who don't remember Kung Fu Master, you're this one guy, you're going through stages up a building, and you have to fight certain people to try to keep, to get better. And you didn't need special weapons. You just needed to know. It was more the timing, right?
Yeah,
you had to learn.
Learn the patterns that they were coming at you. Because all you had, correct me if I'm wrong, it was you can only kick or punch, low kick or low punch, and jump and duck.
Exactly.
I think those. But it was great though.
Yes.
It was one of the best fighting games. It was like a video game, 2D video game version of the scene in Kill Bill with the crazy idiots, like we were talking about.
Yes.
Like that's what it felt like.
And it's there was one stage where a guy comes, I want to say he was dressed like a ninja. He's throwing ninja stars at you, and you have to either jump over or duck under.
Yeah.
And if your timing was off, it's like you're dead.
Yep.
You're dead. And it was one of the first games they came out and automatically gave you 5 lives. Like all games usually was just like 3 lives. This game started with 5 lives because they knew it's going to take you that long to try to get to that top level, which was a cool thing because us kids, we never heard of that. We're like, whoa, you got 5 lives?
Yeah.
It's like, Jesus Christ. And when they came over from the video arcade game to Atari, and I was killing Atari for like the bad graphics, but they took the same exact concept of the game and put it in the Atari version. The only difference was the graphics wasn't as good, but the gameplay was exactly the same. So it's like, I didn't need to go to the arcade game. I can just sit here and play Kung Fu Master the whole time, and it was real. Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. There is that was probably one of the first that really you got the same feeling you got at the arcade.
Yes. Yes.
And I used to I liked when games would have the arcade mode. And I never honestly I don't even really notice the difference.
Yeah.
Maybe like the controlling might be a little different or something like that,
yeah.
but no, that one for sure was.
What's arcade mode? What does this do?
Yeah.
Still
when you were
waiting.
When you were talking about how back then a lot of the Atari games were like really simple and not much going on graphically, but I think when they stepped the game up was when they did Donkey Kong.
Yes.
When that arcade game came out, and for those of you who don't know, Donkey Kong is the first time you see Mario from Mario Brothers, who wasn't Mario yet. His name was Jumpman actually back then.
That's right.
Yeah. And you had to, I believe the princess's name was like Pauline or something like that. And Donkey Kong kidnaps her and takes her to the top, and you're this jump man, and you got to make it up these ladders and levels to save her while he's Donkey Kong's throwing barrels at you and stuff. And there you go. And I mean, I think that was kind of like the beginning of like the upgrade for Atari when they really started doing cool games that were good on the console, not just in the arcade. Now, I don't know, because I know ColecoVision had Donkey Kong. Did Atari have Donkey Kong?
They did. They did. Okay. Graphic wise, probably good graphic game for what Atari can do back then. A little slower, but still the same concept. If you go to the arcade game and you go to your house and you play the Atari version, same exact thing. Gameplay wise, everything was almost identical. Again, just the graphics was different, and it was a fun game. It was again. I would put that up there with Kung Fu Master, because it's one of those games where this is the soundboard. When you die, when you jump. Oh, I can't do Jumpman for some reason. They're not letting play music. But yeah, it was a fun game, and it was one of those games where this is the sound when you start the game. And then Donkey Kong jumps down and breaks the little things, and but it was one of those games where I think about this game now, and I'm like, they took that concept off King Kong, right? The movie King Kong, where.
Well, that's funny. They got sued by Universal.
They did. I remember that. I heard about that. Yeah.
And they won because they did their research, and I guess they found that the word Kong was a synonym, or had become a synonym for big gorilla.
Yeah.
And you had seen stores and all these, businesses with Kong and that imagery in their name. So they were like, well, Universal doesn't own that, and they were like, and I don't think I think Universal knows that they don't own that. Like, they can't sue us for that. And then once you took that out of the equation, all the other things had nothing to do with the movie. Like, he wasn't climbing a building. Nope. He wasn't, so they were able to beat him, which thankfully they did. And
it's funny because that game, again, like you said, it spawned Mario, right? Because We didn't know who Mario was. Just we didn't even know his name was Mario till like later on when they came out with a game and they called it Mario Brothers. But man, that game was one of those high intense games. I don't seriously think I ever passed the second level.
Yeah, I mean that one. That was another one that I wasn't good at.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I spent a lot of money on probably just the first level.
No, I would say I got as far as the second level, and I would be one of those kids who would just sit there and watch what the third level looked like because I never got to the third level. If I did get to the third level, it's maybe like my older teen years where like my eye-hand coordination was a little bit better. But as a kid, man, it was one of those games where if you couldn't hit the barrel or jump over the barrel at the same, I mean, it was one of those games where it's like,
I was terrible. It wasn't until they came out years later with Donkey Kong Country for Super Nintendo that was like a 3D, not 3D, but like a Mario. Sorry, I always say Mario, but Mario Brothers type game.
Yeah.
And that one was probably my favorite game for a long time.
Yeah.
But that changed the game for me actually, because
you can say Mario if you want, man. We all know you're from New York. It's okay, man.
I know, it's all right. I get made fun of.
Mario Brothers. It's all right, man. I was making fun of you. I was just like, there's that New York accent again. Mario. What's Mario? But yeah, man, Atari had so many cool games. And what I loved about Atari was if you saw a new arcade game, either at the bowling alley, we didn't have arcades here. In San Francisco, we had bowling alleys. So you would find the new and latest. Actually, you know what? I take that back. We did have an arcade place here in the worst part of Market Street in San Francisco.
Of course.
It was the worst part of Market Street that's where the crackheads hung out. That's where the hookers hung out. So we were never allowed there. So we would always go to the bowling alleys, and if you wanted to find a new bowling alley or a new game, you would go to the bowling alley. And if you saw a game like Spy Hunter that came out in 1982, you knew, give it a couple months, Atari's going to have that game. And back then games were like $20, not like games now where they're like $50, $60, right? Games were like $20. So like you already knew, Dad, in 2 months Spy Hunter's coming out and I want that game for Atari, right? So it's like, you knew it was coming out. So it's like you would just go there, you probably waste $1, you put $1 in one of those. If you guys don't remember, we used to have to take $1. It had to be a nice crisp dollar. We'd have to stick it in one of the change machines. And if you were lucky, you got it right the first time.
Yeah, hopefully it worked, because I felt like if it didn't work the first time, it was not going to work for the next 10 times.
You would always get that one OG guy, and I mean an OG guy, a guy who's like, we would call the bowling alley rat, because he was never a bowler. He was just there waiting for someone to buy him a drink, and he would always come up to you, and he would like have this, like he would fold $1 in half, and he would like make sure the corners, and then he would lick his fingers and lick his hand, and he would take that $1 and put it in the machine, and next thing you know, your quarters come out. Here you are waiting there, like you've been there for like 5 minutes. You couldn't get it. You're getting upset. You're pissed off. You're like, this is what the picture looks like. This is how I'm doing it. You have this one guy, he comes there, he does this thing, and he tells you the one thing: you gotta have patience, my son. You gotta have patience.
Yep. Shout out to all the OGs teaching kids how to put dollars in the machines.
And then it was one of those. If you would sit there and waste $1 playing this video game that you knew in a couple months was going to come out on a console.
Mm-hmm. But it's for the love of the game, man.
It's for the love of the game. And it's one of those things where, like, if you got to the bowling alley and Pac-Man and nobody was there playing Pac-Man, you were the first one to play Pac-Man because you wanted to play Pac-Man, because you knew once people started rolling in that game, you will never touch that game. You used to line up your quarters, across the video games, and it's like you knew for sure you weren't going to play that video game.
Yeah, and it was always usually like a hierarchy anyway, where those kids, the kid who had their name up on top with the high score, they were always like the kind of MVP, the LeBrons.
Yeah.
Kids part ways, and hold on, the golden child is here. They have to play.
George Costanza's here to get his Frogger machine.
Yeah, Frogger. Like, that's another one. But it was the same for me growing up. We didn't have really arcades. It would just be random places that had arcade games. Like the first one I remember. That had Miss Pac-Man and was it Ghosts and Goblins?
Oh my God, love that game.
It was I want to say Castlevania as well. This was a candy store, right?
Okay.
When I was a kid, and it was a great candy store. It was just, they had this big wall with all the like plastic containers with the numbers, and you're like,
Yeah,
oh, let me
yeah.
get 16 cents, right? And then they had 3 games, and they had newspapers, and then there was this door in the back, and we would go in there, and our parents would give us like $1, and we're sitting there playing the games. But as we were playing, there's always have adults going in and out of that door in the back, and just like adults from the neighborhood that your neighbors, Mrs. This, Mr. That,
Yeah.
whatever, and you never really trip off of it. And it wasn't until I got older and I was talking to my dad, and I was like, "Hey, Dad, remember that candy store that I used to play video games at?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "What was the deal? Like, what with that door?" Like, he's like, "Oh yeah, they used to run numbers back there." I was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "That's why I used to stop there after work and play your mom's number and my number, and then pick up candies for you guys." It's like,
For you guys who don't know what numbers are, that was back then the illegal way to do lotto.
right.
It was
Right.
a legal way to do lotto.
Yeah.
You pick a couple numbers. If you win, you get some money. If you don't, then you don't, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah. And then, when I got older, like when the what is that? Street Fighter days, let's just
Oh
say,
my God, yeah.
it was like the laundromat down the street, they had a couple games
Yeah.
in there, or it was just always something random. We didn't have like your typical arcade. There was one in Staten Island, but it wasn't really that close to me. I never
Okay.
went that often, but, or if you were lucky enough to go to like Circus with your,
Yes. Yes.
with your parents or something like
Yes.
that. But that was about it. You're always in some hole in the wall playing Superman arcade.
So I got lucky because I grew up right down the street from Japantown Bowling. For you guys who grew up in the city, you guys remember Japantown Bowling, and the arcade. As soon as you walk in the front door, it was 2 rows of arcades, right? And I want to say it was about 15 on one side and like 20 on the other side. And then they had some snuck away in the back, and those are the older games that nobody plays anymore, right? They had the popular games in front. And again, you go there at a certain time and you saw nobody playing one of the popular games, that's what you're going for right away. You're jumping on that thing. And that's where I got my, what new game is going to be coming out on Atari, right? What new game is going to be coming out? And it's like, when you knew the arcade games or the bowling alleys had the new games, you knew a couple months later Atari was going to have it also. And it was kind of cool. It was kind of cool to have. And again, it's like you either, your dad was nice enough to buy it for you, or your dad's like, here's $2, go to the bowling alley.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing too. Like you said, parents were frugal. They couldn't buy every game that came out right when it came out. So your next best bet would be to go to the arcade and save your lunch money, or and go play that until maybe you get lucky enough that they buy it for Christmas or something when it's on sale.
I had a buddy, a good friend of mine, DJ Derek D, who lived down the hall from me, and he was one of those lucky kids that you would go over his house and he would ask you, "What game do you want to play?" And you're like, "What? What do you have?"
There's always that one kid.
Opens up the little like briefcase that has all the little games, right? And you're like, "Wow, you have all these games?"
It's glowing.
It's like, what do you have? I only have combat. I mean, yeah, you had those kids, and luckily for me, he was a good friend of mine. He's my best friend till this day. We still talk, and we always bring up the old Atari games. And he was like, "Dude, when you came to our house and you played Atari, my mom was like, Eric, it's time to eat." You're like, I can't. I gotta pass this stage." It's like, yeah, I remember those times. Like, I remember those times. It was fun times, man. Nostalgia games. I love it.
Yeah, man. It's my best pastime. I mean, like I said earlier, me and my wife were playing freaking Pac-Man because I was like, well, let me, it's kind of getting the mood for the for the episode, and so we have the Nintendo Mini that came out, I don't know, it was 2 years ago, I think, and it has maybe about 20 games on there, and so one of them is Pac-Man, and it's because it's one of the few 2-player games that are on there.
Yeah,
we were playing that, and I mean, I forgot how fun it was. I mean, we were both like cracking up, and it was just like we were back to being little kids again. Just that nostalgia, the excitement of like, oh man, they're about to kill me, and then the person you're playing with is like yelling behind your ear. You're like, shut up! I know where I'm going. Like,
I got this. I got this.
That feeling never changes.
Yes.
At least for me. I think that's what's cool about them.
I'm throw out a good movie to watch if you want to talk about old school nostalgia 80s games. Ready Player One came on the other night, and just that movie, the Easter eggs in that movie, just everything in that movie shouts 80s video games. And they do mention Atari, they do mention all this stuff in that game. And it's one of those movies where if it comes on, I like it. And, you know, when we start talking about movies that should have a sequel, that's going to be on top of the list because I think they should come out with a sequel that, if they're going to keep it to that concept of old school nostalgia games. But if they're not and they decide to go somewhere else, then no, I don't want it.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely, it has all the classic video game characters that we were just talking about. And in fact, I even think it has, I don't know if and I have to look back now, it has one of the creators of, I think it's Pac-Man or one of these games in the movie. I don't know if it's the actual guy or if it's someone playing him.
Wow.
But I want to say it's the actual guy from a documentary I was watching earlier about video games. I was like, oh, hey, I think that's the real guy that was in the movie.
Easter eggs. He's one of those things. And what I love about 80s nostalgia video games is everywhere you look, from like Big Bang Theory to Ready Player One, any 80s movies you watch, you're going to hear anything that has to deal with Atari. You're going to hear something or see something in the background. Someone's going to be wearing a shirt that has the Atari logo on it. It's one of those cool things. It took me forever to finally realize that Atari logo actually is Atari. That's their logo. That's their symbol. If you look at it close enough, I'm going to pull it up right now because I don't want to.
Oh, is it? You mean it spells Atari?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Let me pull it up right now because I know I'm going to shoot myself. It doesn't spell Atari, but it has the A that the Atari made famous, you know, back in the 80s. And you cannot look at that symbol and not associate that with Atari because it's one of those things where it's like, hey, that's an Atari. I've been on the hunt for this shirt for the longest time. And only because it was Atari was first came out in 1972. That was the year that I was born. And it says Atari and it says established in 1972. And it's one of those shirts where it's like, it fits, it's perfect for me because that's the year I was born. So it's like just trying to find that shirt is kind of, and it's not just any regular shirt. This shirt is kind of like the colorful, has like green. It's like a rainbow color shirt because when the Atari first came out, that's the logo that they had. So it's one of those things where it's like, I know I want it. I'm gonna find it. I haven't really been
70s Technicolor vibe.
Yeah. Before the Pride came out and decided we're gonna use this as our colors. This is our colors. We call dibs.
Dibs. You know what's cool? A cool thing about Atari too. They were one of like the first kind of startup companies in Silicon Valley. Like they almost kind of set the model for a lot of how companies run now. Where I think his name is last name is Bushnell was like the CEO or whatever. The way he got a lot of these programmers to come work for him, he's like basically, well, look, you can wear whatever you want. If you want to come in flip flops, he's like, you can come in whatever time you want. Stay as long as you want. We're not going to judge you by that. You're an adult. You can do what you want. We'll judge you by your output and what you do ultimately. And it was a hit, and he just started pumping out these games, and then people loved it, and that whole kind of atmosphere that they created is like kind of like the standard now that we see in Silicon Valley and all these startups.
Yeah. I mean, I want to work for a place like that where I don't have to really dress up every day. You know, it's
that's why I do this. I wish I could do this and just get paid for it.
We will, because you know the universe is going to work our way, right? You know,
it is.
It's going to work.
The universe is listening.
Someone's going to say, "Hey, they're talking about music, movies. Now they're talking about arcades. Let's get these guys." But yeah, you know, it's like I don't think video games would be where they are right now if it wasn't for Atari. And you know, Atari is still kicking out some games. So for you guys, you new gamers out here, look who makes it. You know, it could say Namco, it could say Midway, but look who created that game for us. You know, somewhere down there, you're going to see the word Atari. And again, video games right now wouldn't be where they are if it wasn't for Atari. This is true. What I love about Atari, period, is when you hear sounds like this, that's from the game Pitfall. you know, that came out. That was one of my other favorite games. All their little deaths. I mean, I can pull up, you know, a bunch of different soundboards, and just the sounds of their death, from Pac-Man dying to Pitfall dying. It's one of those things where you're like, wow, you know.
But those sounds brought the game to life, though. Just even like, you know, we're talking about Donkey Kong with Mario when he would walk, and just like the dip, 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 like just the little things you take for granted, but really make the game, like you said. You hear that sound, you're like, where do I know that? I know that sound. That's, you know, oh, I love that game. You know, instantly when I hear the beginning of the Mario music, you know, I mean, you already just you already know what it is.
This is my favorite. I don't know. Let me see if this has it. I don't think it has it. It might not have it. But when this game came out, the arcade and Atari. No, that's not it. It only has the ending. Dig Dug.
Dig Dug.
When this is my favorite. This is I would say the best death. When Dig Dug first came out, and it came out, I have it written down, I can't even see the year. But when Dig Dug first came out, it was one of those games where it was kind of like a Pac-Man game, where you had to, you know, you had to dig and you had to kill. Right. I forget what monsters those were. It was one of those games. Oh, here's the intro. Again, it just brings me back brings me back, and I could sit here and download all these things. And it's funny because I had Pac-Man, I had someone's text tone for the longest time, and this was their text tone that I had put in. But it came to a point where that person was texting me back to back to back to back, and that's all I kept hearing. So I was like, you know what?
I gotta change this.
You're gonna get the default text tone because you're killing my thing right now. I'm done with you. But man, this is one of those. This is exactly why we have to break it down in two parts, because we haven't even left Atari yet. We jumped ship a little bit, but you know, this might even have to go to 3 parts, because there's a couple arcade systems on here. I guess next week we can touch on, you know, NES and Super NES. And then
throwing some Sega in there too.
Sega, I mean,
the rival.
That's funny, because growing up, you had Nintendo. For me, at least, it was just Atari, right? And then there was ColecoVision. And now that I think about it, ColecoVision was the competitor to Atari. The graphics was a little bit better for ColecoVision. The price was a little bit more for ColecoVision, because now you're paying for a little bit more better graphics. But the makers of video games were jumping more on Atari, because everybody in the world had an Atari console, right? Everybody at home had an Atari, where you probably had one or two, maybe like the wealthy kids that had ColecoVision. So,
and they were making the best games. So they thought, well, if they're making the game, the console's got to be better.
Yeah. And again, I've never seen a ColecoVision live in person. I never touched it. Everyone I knew that had the console only had an Atari console. You know, one kid at school was like, I had a ColecoVision, but he was that one kid that you can't go over his house because, you know, you're afraid that if you, bring this game over, just like he would take your video game, and you're like, nope.
Yep. Real quickly though, before we go, when I was talking early, and I forgot to mention this, when I was talking about when those guys from MIT got sued by Universal, I'm sorry, when they got sued by Atari for making the game enhancements and all that stuff, and they ended up, you know, settling out and stuff. I want to make sure I got my facts right, but their lawyer, his name. Hold on, hang on. Sorry.
No worries.
Bring it back.
Okay.
The lawyer for when Universal was suing them for King Kong. Sorry.
Yes.
When they were suing Atari for King Kong,
Donkey Kong.
Their lawyer, who basically won the case for them. I forget his last name. His first name was Kirby, and that's who they ended up making the Kirby game after, as a thank you. And if you look at it, you know, Kirby's this little round, fat, pink guy. And if you look at the lawyer, he was bald, he had chubby cheeks and kind of pinkish hue to his skin. And that was like kind of just like again, another Easter egg, another thank you to him, just for saving, because Atari was still a small company at that time. Had they lost that case, there would have been no Atari.
Yeah.
So he saved video games.
Kirby, man, dude, Kirby. Kirby is one of those games, where I swear to God, I thought a Japanese guy made it just because of hearing those little sounds. You're like, this must have been a Japanese guy that made the game, and that could be another topic too, because like when Nintendo came out, you had the US Nintendo games and then the Japanese Nintendo games that never even made it to America. We can talk about that moving forward next week. But, this is fun. I mean, again, nostalgia stuff, man. The past couple podcasts we've done just talking about old stuff and you're bringing me back to it's like, one, you're showing my age because it's like if I can remember freaking Pong, and I can remember the release date for like these video games, you're bringing me back to the good old days, which is good. I definitely like it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna just spent many hours sitting here in front of a TV like trying to solve Frogger or finish Frogger and then like.
No, but I mean, I'm glad because like I said, I was younger when a lot of these games came out. I played them, later as I got older. But to get your perspective, you played them when they came out and live as is. That to me is cool, because
as is.
Because things change. Like they come out with all these, even for my games that I played. When they bring them out again, it's still something a little different. Now it's all streamlined and everything's a little updated, and it was just something about that kind of rough unfinishedness about it, that just helped make the game. And not to mention crappy quality of your TVs. That was probably the size of your wall. So again, it's all about the experience and when and where you were when you were playing these games, which is why some kids maybe today may not get why you're like two sticks going up and down.
And what the sad part is, like I one time I did try to find an old vintage Atari, and I mean vintage, just so I can hook it up and play it, but it would have cost me more than what the system cost when it first came out, because now I got to find the TV connector. I got to find all this. It's a lot cheaper to actually buy that one that I told you about where it just came out with the joystick and it has a bunch of different games on it. But it'd be nice to have one, but it'd be a bitch putting it together because it's,
Yeah.
Kids, you don't know the struggle we had to go through with video games back then. You guys don't even know what UHF is because you never had to, stick that little hook thing in the back, and you don't know
what it is to make sure the TV's on channel 3.
And if it didn't work on channel 3, it might work on channel 2 if you took the switch and flipped it.
Yep.
Yeah, kids, you guys don't know the struggle we went through, man.
You're lucky.
We went through a lot. You guys know when you're like CD and one of my sons is like, I don't need CD. I asked him, hey, PlayStation and Xbox is coming out, right? There's two different versions. Which one do you guys want? Do you want the CD version, or do you guys want? I'm not going to buy it for them. I'm just saying if I did come around buying for them, which one did you want? And they're like, oh, we just want the digital one because we don't buy games. We don't buy CDs no more. We just download them. I'm like, well, download them? Like, what the hell are you talking about? Download them? Like, I seriously did not know what they meant when they say download them. Yeah. Then I go to my younger son. I look at his Xbox. He has 20 games, and I'm like, how'd you get these games? Like, I downloaded them. I'm like, what?
Your credit card?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that's what the $30 went. It's like, now we're downloading games. Before you used to have to buy the games, and now you're just downloading them digitally. It's like, wow. Jeez.
Yeah. I think the last 3 games I bought, I just downloaded it directly to the Xbox or the PlayStation.
I can never buy a console for me because, I bought a PlayStation, I bought an Xbox. You have 2 sons. You can't buy one console for one and hope they share. I tried it didn't work. So one of them ended up taking my Xbox and my PS4. Is that what's that? Yeah, the PS4. So I said, you know what? I need something for me to, so I bought myself a Switch, Nintendo Switch.
Nice.
I like it. It's cool. But then a month or 2 later, it's missing. I don't know where it is. And I'm asking one of the boys, hey, who has my Nintendo Switch? They're like, oh, do you need it? I'm like, I kind of want to play. Yeah.
It is mine.
And then I look at it and there's like 30 downloaded games on there. And the thing about my kids versus me, as I get older, again, in the beginning of the podcast, I told you guys I am not big on RPG games. I hate those games. I'm more
Really?
I hate those games. I'm more
I
the
love 'em.
Street Fighter type games. I'm more the sports games. So those are the two games that I would play. Street Fighters and sports games. But Street Fighters and Mortal Kombat's gotten a little more technical from what I used to remember.
They have, yeah.
You know, because before you used to just, take the joystick and do all this and you can do the, Shoryuken. Now you got to go down, down, up, right, B, left.
Yeah. Now you need at least 2 years of official MMA training before you can play the game.
And you have to have a good memory if you want a fatality in Mortal Kombat. And I don't have a good memory,
No. Oh, yeah. No, forget it.
I'm that kid that can never finish them. I'm not going to finish them.
And I don't have the hand-eye coordination to Google it on my phone really quick to figure out how to do it and then play. Because I've seen kids just like
That's my son, my older son. He'll look at it while he's playing the video game, and next he'll do it. And I'm like, how'd you do that? I'm still fighting you.
I have arthritis in my thumbs. I can't do this.
I'm still fighting you. And then sure enough, like 20 minutes later, I'm like, I can't play no more, man. This is making me dizzy. Let's put this away.
Yeah. Then the old man headache sits there. It's like, you guys play. I'm gonna go lay down.
I'm done. This has been fun. So next week we're gonna talk about Nintendo. Nintendo. Super NES. I'm gonna definitely put a question out there. I want someone other than Casey to answer. So if there's anyone else out there.
But thank you, Casey, man. Shout out to you, and we will get to Halo 2 because that consumed a lot of my life there for a little while.
Yes, it consumed a lot of my kids' life, and I think I didn't start playing Halo till the 4th one came out.
Oh wow!
That's because they were at school, and I was able to get the system. And So we'll talk about
your game
that.
back.
Yes, I want my Switch back, please. But yeah, we'll definitely come out with more. I'll throw out another question next week. This time I'll make it specific to NES, and maybe throw out Dreamcast out there.
Yeah, Dreamcast, Sega, Game Boy.
Yeah.
Anything from that. You guys know video games.
Yeah. Crips and Bloods of video games. You got your Nintendo and your Sega, and
yeah, that was. We'll get into that. There was.
It's still.
You were one kid. You were Sega or you were Nintendo.
It's still going on. It's like
It's very similar to what just went on with the election.
Oh my God!
You had your left and you had your right. You had just Sega, Nintendo.
I don't get political, but shout outs to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for being the first African American Asian female vice president of the United States. Shout out to you guys for that. Shout out to Kamala Harris's husband for being the first second man.
Is that what he's being called? I was wondering.
Because you got the first lady,
right?
And then usually if the vice president's a man, it's a second lady.
Yeah, but I wasn't sure if they were going with second gentleman or second man.
Oh, you know what? It could be gentleman. It could be second gentleman, but I'm ghetto, so I'm gonna call him a man.
It doesn't roll off the tongue as well.
No. But it's funny because
second dude.
You guys got to watch the episode of SNL. Joe was talking about Jim Carrey, how his favorite comedian Jim Carrey plays Joe Biden to the T, and it's perfect. It's perfect. So go watch the SNL. Just watch the Joe Biden thing. It's pretty cool.
And I hope this doesn't mean that Alec Baldwin is going to stop doing Donald Trump impersonations. Please, because that is one of the best impersonations. Yes. I look forward to that on SNL.
He needs to. If you didn't watch it yesterday, Joe, you got to watch it. The one from last night.
Yeah,
it was pretty cool. But yes, they need to bring him back. They need to bring him back 3 years later and say, are they still counting? Something like that. They need to do that. They need to keep him on there. He's definitely we could do a podcast about SNL, so we can talk about that, because
maybe we should.
There's a lot of SNL moments that I love that
and it's been around for a long time.
And you growing up in New York it'll be nice to pick your brain on what SNL was like in New York. So we'll talk about that. We'll discuss that moving forward. Next week, video games. This week, everyone have a great week. Have a good week, and it's been fun.
Yep, as always, for the Ordinary Joes.
See ya.
Peace.
You're listening to the Ordinary Joe's podcast.